enjoy talking to our next generation. Believe it or not, I'm traveling most of this country. I'm usually on the young side of the room, so this one makes me feel good. I'm on the other side. Let me tell you something about myself. I'll take you back to when I was in 1993 when I was in second grade. I heard Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech for the first time. That was the speech where he said, I hope my 4 children grow up in a country where they are judged not on the color of their skin, but on the content of their character. That dream, it stuck with me. It meant something to me because it was the dream that allowed me to go in a single generation from being the kid of Indian immigrants who came to this country with almost no money to becoming the founder of a multi-billion-dollar biotech company that I led as CEO for 7 years. Thank you for that, man. I appreciate that. That was what that was my vision of the American dream. That's what this country was about. We worked on medicines. 5 of them are FDA-approved today. One of them is a life-saving therapy in kids. 100% of them die by the age of 3 if they're not treated. Now a majority of those kids live lives of normal duration when they are treated. Thank you. I appreciate it. That was my world, outside of politics, focusing on how I could make contributions through my own hard work, commitment, and dedication, through the best system known to man to lift people up from poverty. That is capitalism, where you provide something at greater value to someone than it costs you to make it. That's honest work and how you get ahead in the United States of America. At least that's what I thought. Thank you. We don't apologize for that. But I stepped down from my job as a biotech CEO to focus on a different kind of cancer. A biological cancer, no. This time it was a cultural cancer that threatened to kill that dream that Martin Luther King had 60 years ago. A cultural cancer that threatened to kill that dream that allowed me to achieve everything I ever had in my life. That is a new secular cult in this country that has led us to the doorstep of a national identity crisis. That's where I think we are today. We're in the middle of a nationwide identity crisis. I speak to you, many of you are in Gen Z. I speak to you as a member of my generation. I'm a millennial. I'm the first millennial ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. I appreciate that. And I will tell you something, speaking as a member of my generation, really on behalf of our generations, that what's going on in our country today is that we are all so hungry for a cause. We are starved for purpose and meaning and identity at a time in our national history when the things that used to fill that void, faith, patriotism, hard work, family, these things have disappeared. And that leaves a black hole, a moral vacuum in its wake. And you want to know what happens when you have a black hole that runs that deep? That is when the poison fills the void. It almost doesn't matter what the poison is, actually. I say this as somebody who's written books entitled, the first one was called Woke Inc. It was an explication of the woke infection across corporate America and across our culture. But the reality is that's just a symptom. Wokeism, transgenderism, climatism, COVIDism, globalism. It's not just political. Depression, anxiety, fentanyl usage, suicide. These are symptoms of a deeper void of purpose and meaning in our country. We're like a bunch of blind bats, we human beings are. Flying around in some cave, we're lost. Trying to figure out where we are in that cave. You don't know how a bat figures out where it is? It can't see. It's blind. Sends out sonar signals. Bounces off the wall of that cave. It comes back. It says, this is where I am. We human beings, we do the same thing. Young people and old, we're not that different. We send out these signals. It bounces off of, say, a pillar of truth, like my family, the two parents who brought me into this world. To say that means something to me, that is true. That bounces back. It tells me this is where I am. I send out a signal. It bounces off of my faith in God, my belief in this nation. These things are true. That means something to me. That bounces back. It tells me this is where I am. I work hard. I create something in the world. I am proud of that. That means something to me. It is true. That bounces back. It tells me this is where I am. Well, what happens when those things each disappear? We send out these signals, and then nothing comes back. We're lost in that cave. And as odd as it might sound, I think that is actually our opportunity. This is our moment as conservatives, as Americans, to now level up and say we're now done playing whack-a-mole. Right? You whack down the wokeism here, you got some transgenderism over there, a little communism and covidism over here. We're done playing that game. We're done running from something. This is our moment to start running to something. To our vision of what it means to be an American. That is how we dilute the woke agenda to irrelevance. That is how we win. That is what I want to see us now level up and do. It's not just pointing out the problem, we're running to something. This is our moment. Ask somebody my age, somebody your all's age, what does it mean to be an American? You get a blank stare in response. That's the vacuum. That's the void. We're going to fill that void with our vision, our answer. To me, what it means to be an American is that we believe in the ideals that set this nation into motion 250 years ago. Ideals like meritocracy and the pursuit of excellence, that you get ahead in this country, not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions. That is why I've said that as your next president, I will end affirmative action in every sphere of American life. It has been a cancer on our national soul. What does it mean to be an American? It means we believe in the rule of law. That if you are like my parents, you do get to come to this country legally through the front door, follow the rules, pay your taxes, make your contributions, come here to be an American. And that's a good thing. But it also means that your first act of entering this country cannot break the law. And that is why I've said that as your next president, I will use the U.S. military to secure our own southern border. That is what it means to believe in the rule of law. What does it mean to be an American? It means we believe in a radical dream that our founding fathers had, a radical dream that I have as a citizen today. That the people who we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government. Not this managerial, bureaucratic deep state that actually runs the show today. If you all put me there as your next president, and I can't work for the federal government for more than 8 years, which I think is a good thing, then neither should any of those federal bureaucrats reporting into me either. 8-year term limits for the bureaucracy. instead of these civil service protections. And when there's a government agency that should not exist, that has become so corrupt that it moves beyond the point of reform, we can't just tinker around the edges and hope for change. The right answer is that we will take those three-letter agencies, starting from the Department of Education to the FBI to the ATF to the IRS to the CDC, and we will shut them down. That is how we revive our constitutional republic in this country. There's certain moments that come over the course of American history. You all are lucky to grow up in one of them. We live in a 1776 moment right now. This is not about Republicans and Democrats in the year 2023. It is not black versus white. It is not man versus woman. It's not red versus blue. This is a moment between the managerial class and the everyday citizen. That is what we fought an American Revolution for 250 years ago. To say that we the people, for better or worse, we the people settle our differences through free speech and open debate in the public square where every person's voice and vote counts equally in a constitutional republic, where we can be trusted to make those decisions instead of delegating them to the back of palace halls, whether that's in old world Europe or whether that's a palace hall in a government bureaucratic building or BlackRock's corner office on Park Avenue in Manhattan. We reject that vision. That is the Great Reset. We stand for the Great Uprising. That is the 1776 moment. You all live in that moment. And this is one of those rare moments where we look ourselves in the mirror and we ask ourselves. That's what I think the 2024 election is about, by the way. That is what I think this primary is about, by the way. Do we want incremental reform? Or do we want a true revolution in this country? I stand on the side of the American Revolution. I stand for the ideals of 1776. Above all, 1776 and our American Revolution was founded on the truth, that we would speak the truth, that we would stand up for the truth, that we would do it without apology. That is what we're doing starting tonight. We're speaking the truth, and we will do it without apology. God is real. There are two genders. Fossil fuels are a requirement for human prosperity. Reverse racism is racism. An open border is not a border. Parents determine the education of their children. The nuclear family is the best known form of governance to mankind. Capitalism is the best system known to man to lift people up from poverty. There are three branches of government, not four, and the U.S. Constitution is the strongest guarantor of freedom in human history. That is the truth. We will fight for the truth. We stand up for the truth. That is what won us the American Revolution. That is what will win us the revolution of 2024. Thank you all. God bless you. God bless your families. Let's open this up. Let's have a conversation tonight. We stand up for the truth. Thank you.
We will now be starting Q&A. Please state your name, where you're from, and a brief question. We will now be starting Q&A. Please state the school you're from, your name, and a brief question.
Hi Vivek, my name is Julia Rappaport. I go to Wheaton College. You and your boldness to stand for the truth is so incredibly inspiring. Thank you for being here tonight. The question I have for you is that I've heard you often speak about restoring a national identity to Americans. So much of America's youth have been deceived by social justice, personal pronouns, climate change hysteria. What's the root of the problem? How come the left has been able to have such a stronghold in young people today? And what's the solution?
So I'll tell you a big part of the answer to that question. You got to give credit where credit is due. The left has the diagnosis right. It goes back to that void, that spiritual void. Yeah, old saying that goes, if you stop believing in God, you're still going to believe in something. If there's a hole the size of God in your heart and God does not fill it, something else will instead. The same can be said of belief in a nation. So the left preys on that. They understand that deeply, to say there's this void, we're going to fill it with our vision. Race, gender, sexuality, climate. And we've fallen into the trap of saying, no, here's all the reasons why all that's hypocritical. I've fallen into that trap. I've done plenty of that over the last several years. And there's a time and place for spotting the problem. But that's not enough. If they're feeding us their vision of race, gender, sexuality, and climate, I want us talking more about the value of the individual, the family, the nation, and yes, God. Individual, family, nation, God defeats race, gender, sexuality, and climate. But that's up to us. We're not going to pin that on the left. We're going to pin that at our own feet, say, this is our moment to level up and actually offer our own affirmative vision. We have failed to do it. We teach young people, we say, go to Ben & Jerry's and order a cup of ice cream with some social justice sprinkles on the side. Make yourself feel better about yourself. That's not how you satisfy a moral hunger. You do not satisfy a moral hunger with fast food. We demand the real thing. That is ultimately how we fix it. Now, I think there's some tactics we can talk about. I think every high school student in this country should have to pass the same civics test that every immigrant has to pass in order to become a citizen of this country. You don't value a country that you just passively inherit. You got to know something about that country. You got to have skin in the game to play in the game. So there's solutions. There's room for policy. I'm going to bring some of that. If you elect me as your next president, I have ideas of specifics we'll bring to the table. But that's still just symptomatic therapy. We need to revive the real thing. And I think that's how we actually dilute the poison to irrelevance. That's how we win. Thanks for that question. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for coming here. My name is Brooks Elson. I'm a third-year undergraduate student at Florida State University. Question that I have for you is, as far as I'm aware, you're the only presidential candidate to actually go to the south side of Chicago in Kensington and Philadelphia, where there is a massive, massive problem with drug use in this country, specifically in these highly densely populated urban areas. And my question for you, sir, is if you're president, what would a President Ramaswamy do to address the rampant drug issues that are going on in this country, especially in these urban areas where people are literally dying every single day?
I've seen it with my own eyes. And to tell you the truth, my parents growing up, they came from India. We had grandparents still in India. We visited them while they were alive when we were growing up. That was a third world nation in the 1990s when we visited. You've seen stuff that my classmates growing up didn't see in Evendale, Ohio. I haven't seen something like I saw in Kensington when I went there 2 months ago. Not in India, not anywhere else. People shooting up in the middle of the day on the street. Looks like something out of a zombie movie. It's really saddening to see. Here's what we do. A big part of this is supply driven. From Wuhan, I'm not kidding you, I'm not making this up. Synthetic materials to make fentanyl synthetically south of our own border, where there are 800 Chinese chemists pumping up that fentanyl across our porous Swiss cheese of a southern border that is now killing and responsible for the deaths of 200 Americans per day here on American soil. That's 50 times the number of people who died on 9/11, going to die this year as a consequence of fentanyl poisoning. I say poisoning, not overdose, because many of them are dying of, they're thinking they're taking Percocet. They're actually laced with fentanyl. That's unacceptable. Easiest thing the next president can do is to seal that southern border, and if necessary, the northern border too. The wall is insufficient. They are building tunnels underneath the wall. Using the military is legally, morally, and ethically justified. I can get that done through redeployments in the first 6 months on the job. We're done with the supply side of the problem. There's a second half to this. It's always easy to point the finger at somebody else, and here it's correctly pointed at somebody else. But we also have to take a long, hard look in the mirror. There's a demand side problem in this country. I talked to actually one of those people while he was, I think it must have been heroin, shooting up, and we're just having a conversation in Kensington. So what are the aid programs available here? So we go to the aid programs. He pointed to me where the shed was. It's a place that gets reams of money. It looks like it must be some fraudulent operation still sitting out there like it's a shed, where they give away, as he says it, crack pipes and needles. We have a bad habit in this country of paying people to do the exact opposite of what we should want them to do. Give them free tools to use drugs instead of finding people a path off of drugs. Pay people in Kensington, to the south side of Chicago, women, more money not to have a man in the house than to actually have two parents in the house. More money not to go to work than to go to work. For that matter, many of you are recent students. More money for people who don't pay back their student loans than for people who actually do. That's a bad habit we need to end in this country, is stop using federal taxpayer dollars to give money to people to do exactly the opposite of what we should actually want them to be doing, to live flourishing lives. And a big part of the reason we see it, it is not a coincidence that we see the rise of this depression and anxiety and mental health epidemic at the same time that we see the rise of this drug epidemic in our country. That goes back to reviving our own fortitude and discovering who we really are as a people. And so yes, the Mexico piece of this is half of it, but half of it is fixing the demand side of the problem. And I think we have good news, is we have solutions on both fronts. It's just going to take a president with a spine to actually deliver it. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you. Please.
Hello, Mr. Ramaswamy. My name is Jonathan Panton, and I'm a law student at Chicago-Kent College of Law. Sir, I'm concerned about your policy regarding a potential peace in Ukraine, a peace deal, because I believe that it would fail to deter Vladimir Putin from launching a future invasion of Ukraine, just as the Munich Agreement failed to deter Adolf Hitler from invading Poland just 1 year later. So can you please explain your policy position on the Ukraine peace deal?
Jonathan, first of all, let's give Jonathan a hand for asking a challenging question to a presidential candidate standing in front of him. I appreciate that. We need young people, we need everybody in this country to have the courage to stand up when you may be even the only person in the room who believes what you do, to stand up and actually say it. So thank you for that. I'll tell you what my vision is for ending the Ukraine war. I'm a George Washington, America First conservative. I believe in advancing the interests of our nation. And the way we help the world is that when America is strong at home, we set an example for what is possible for the rest of the free world. So not everyone in this room has to agree with me. My rule as a political candidate is I will tell you who I am and what I believe. Whether you vote for me, that's your choice. And if enough of you put me there, I'll do the job for 8 years. Here's what I believe in Ukraine. I do not believe that this war advances American interests. I do not believe we should be spending $200 billion of taxpayer money to protect somebody else's border halfway around the world when we could use it to protect our own border here at home, right? I also do not believe, and I'm going to also do my part, right? Some of these things you're not supposed to say in public. I'm going to say them to you all anyway. I don't believe that Ukraine is some model of democracy. That is a farce. This is an autocratic state that has banned 11 opposition parties, that has consolidated all media into one state media arm. And so the idea that we're defending democracy against autocracy, these are two thugs going at each other in some other part of the world. Now my question is, how do we advance American interests? So the top threat the U.S. faces, and I'm going to take a moment to explain this because nobody in either party is talking about it. Nobody in the media is talking about it, and you all deserve to know, because you will be the ones affected by it if we don't solve it. The Russia-China military alliance. This is actually the top threat we face. So we want to draw a World War II analogy? Let's talk about Japan and Germany. Okay, that's what I see here in Russia and China, except they have one continuous landmass. Top nuclear stockpile in the world. Hypersonic missile capabilities ahead of that of the U.S. That's Russia. A naval capacity that's ahead of that of the United States. That's in China's hand, by the way, in an economy that we depend on for the shoes on our feet and the phones in our pockets. That's the Russia-China alliance. We are driving Russia into China's arms as we further arm Ukraine in this war that, you mark my words and you hold my feet to this fire, by the time we're even done with this primary, will be a war that it is evident that we will not win, because we don't even know what winning means. And in the meantime, we will have driven Russia even further into China's arms. So the deal I would do with Putin Is it, and by the way, a good deal? Everybody has to get something out of the trade. Let's just be honest about that. The deal I would do with Putin is I would say we would freeze the current lines of control. That's a Korean War-style armistice. We've done it before. Freeze the lines. And further make a hard commitment that NATO will not admit Ukraine to NATO. That's important. But we demand something even greater in return to us. It's a bigger win for us. Putin has to exit his military alliance with China. He has to remove the nuclear weapons from Kaliningrad, the region of Russia that borders Poland, and get the Russian military presence out of the Western Hemisphere, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and so on. That is a deal that Putin should do. I believe he will do. He does not enjoy being Xi Jinping's little brother in that relationship. That is a deal that we absolutely should do, not only because it ends the war in Ukraine and stops our own bleeding. By the way, I bet many of you didn't know this. You're all, and me too, paying the salary, the payroll of the Ukrainian government right now. Like, our tax money is literally paying the Ukrainian government salaries. Not only do we save that money, this is how we deter Xi Jinping from going after Taiwan, because his bet is that the U.S. won't want to mess with two different allied nuclear superpowers at the same time if Russia's in his camp. But if Russia's not in his camp, then he's going to have to think twice before going after Taiwan. This is how we avoid an invasion, how we deter China from invading Taiwan while avoiding war over that island. So that's what I think of as our foreign policy. This is how we advance American interests as George Washington would have. And this goes beyond just saying, hey, I'm non-interventionist, or, I believe in peace through strength. These words mean nothing. I believe in specifics in how we advance our interests. That's the deal I would do. I stand by it. And as, frankly, the next president, my first year, that'll probably be my biggest accomplishment, and something that stops us from sparing the lives of young men and women in a war that we shouldn't be in. So thanks a lot, man. I appreciate that, John. Thank you.
Good evening, Vivek. My name is Zane Bracci. I'm from Michigan State. Go Green.
I'm like an Ohio State fan, so Spartan guy. I could.
At least the name Michigan.
National unity.
Yeah. So my question for you is actually about the Republican primary.
Yeah.
So I've seen it a lot on social media, but I've seen a lot of conservatives who support one candidate calling supporters of another candidate fake conservatives, or saying that they're not true conservatives just because of these minor policy differences. And my question for you is, how, come this time next year, what can we do as conservatives, and what can you do as a candidate to ensure that at the Republican convention next year, we're all united over what unites us fundamentally, our fundamental core values, versus not being divided over these small little minor policy differences?
So I'm going to answer that question on two levels, and both are important. The first one in the near term. I'm committed in this race not to personally attack any of my fellow contenders. I'm not running against any of them. I am running for this nation. We're running to something. That makes us stronger. And the question to ask, and I hope many of you are at that debate, and I'll come to the block party. All right, if you all show up, I'm going to show up at the block party. One of the things I want to see on that debate stage is, let's focus on the what and the why. What do we stand for? Why do we stand for it? We don't need to obsess over the who. Right? That's actually what we need to define. What does it mean to be a conservative today? That's how we unite our movement. And then we level that up, take that same approach. And that's how we unite this country. What does it mean to be an American? I don't even talk about Republicans and Democrats. It doesn't interest me, because both words don't particularly mean something to me right now anyway. The definitions of each are really on the table, if we're honest about it. My question is, are we pro-American? Do we stand for the ideals this nation was founded on? Free speech, self-governance, the rule of law, excellence, the pursuit of meritocracy. Or are we fundamentally, and it exists in this country, anti-American? Do you wish to apologize for a nation founded on those ideals? Now, you divide it up that way, it's not 50-50 anymore. It is easily 80-20 in our favor, and half the 20 are people at least younger than me who never learned what those ideals were in the first place, who, with your help, we can actually bring along with us. So that's what I think is possible, and I think that we can't unite this country if we don't unite our movement first. And the way we unite our movement is recognizing that it's not about me. It's not about us. In the spirit of being honest, I'm just going to speak it to you straight. America First does not belong to me. It doesn't belong to Donald Trump. It doesn't belong to anybody who's on the stage running for president. It belongs to you, to us, to we the people of this country. It is not just being done by us. It is being done through us. That is what it means to believe in one nation under God, to be guided by an actual purpose that goes beyond each of us who are just the vehicles for getting it done. And I think that's the attitude it's going to take, and I want to see a little more of it in this Republican primary that has been too dominated by egos of people who are driven by personal ambition, rather than, I think most of them and most of us at our core are really driven by a true purpose of reviving who we really are, not just as conservatives, but as Americans. I appreciate that question, and I challenge you to ask and remind every one of my peers in this race the same thing. We will be better off for it. Our country will be better off for it. And I'm grateful to you, my man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, sir, for being with us here today. My name is Tyler Seaman. I go to Gettysburg College. Go Bullets. And my question for you, sir, is on the topic of European foreign entanglements. On that topic, what is one actionable item that we can take as a country to ensure that our NATO allies are investing in their defense at the agreed upon levels?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Right now, you're supposed to invest at least 2% of your GDP if you're a NATO member. Over 50% of NATO countries are not meeting that standard today. So, in some sense, we obsess over this Budapest Memorandum in 1994 and say, oh, well, we have to discharge our obligations there, which we already have, without paying a peep to the other commitments that everybody's made. Say the commitment that James Baker made to Gorbachev in 1990 to say that we would not expand NATO 1 inch. That was the quote. Not 1 inch beyond East Germany. Well, look at the way NATO's expanded since. NATO was created to deter the Soviet Union, the USSR. The USSR does not exist, yet NATO has expanded more after the fall of USSR than it ever did during the USSR's existence. And the countries who are now party to it aren't spending the level of money that they're supposed to spend in the first place. So I think one of the problems we have in the managerial class, and that's what I'm going to call it, it's the managerial class in this country, in towns like this one, 3-letter agencies, FDA to SEC to CDC to God knows what, to the international stage, from the UN to NATO to the WHO. You have a lot of institutions that at best should have been a task force that instead got established permanently as lasting institutions and agencies. And so I think we live in a moment where we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of NATO? I would sooner support a rational purpose for PATO, Pacific American Treaty Organization, to deter CCP-led China, which does exist today, unlike the USSR, than to drive with our eyes in the rearview mirror with NATO in the last century, certainly against the backdrop of an environment in which the other countries aren't standing up to their obligations, when in fact it's their security that's actually more relevant with Russia on their doorstep. So does that mean I'm saying I'm going to leave NATO? No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that if we're advancing American interests and we're willing to even ask the question, believe me, they're going to level up and meet their obligations. And if not, we're going to prioritize the threats that we actually face in the United States of America instead of paying for somebody else's collective security. That's the answer. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
This will be our final question.
We'll do one more. We'll do one last. I'll go fast. We can do one more.
Thank you, Mr. Ramaswamy. First time I heard about you was in Utah at a special event where Glenn Beck mentioned this Vivek Ramaswamy, who had done something towards ESG. And the name it's a familiar name. It resonated in my ears. So I looked into you, and I've been able to follow you even before your campaign. And I appreciate your succinctness, your articulation with how you'll do things, not just what you'll do. My question is something that I feel is very important. I followed everything that you've said. As far as I can tell, you haven't spoken on this issue. Please correct me if I'm wrong. recently the movie Sound of Freedom has come out and shed light on a problem that is of profound importance and brought this problem to the light and knowledge of many Americans and people throughout the world. My question is, as a presidential candidate, will you make addressing human trafficking, but specifically child trafficking, a prioritized part of your campaign?
Absolutely, and you're right, I haven't talked about it as much, though I have in a few instances. I'm grateful for the people who made that film, putting a spotlight on what is not just a U.S.-specific issue, but a global issue. And I think the job of the U.S. president is to address that issue first as it relates to the United States. And the unfortunate, unspoken truth is that it is a real issue, even here in the U.S. So one of the ways we address it is the porous southern border in both directions. That's a big part of the child trafficking ring that spans transnational boundaries. That goes a long way. The second thing we need to do is actually enforce the laws that are already on the books. This is where the failure of corrupt institutions like the FBI come back. It's not just the politicized prosecutions of people of one political persuasion versus another. That's what makes cable news at night. But the reality is the FBI has been disastrous at actually enforcing the laws on the books as it relates to crossing state lines with kids in an inappropriate way, part of child sex trafficking or worse, where other institutions actually have been much more successful, like the U.S. Marshals. So one of the things I've done is I don't believe in just taking these things, turning them into slogans, and then check the box and get to the White House and do nothing. I believe in actual specificity of how we're going to get it done. So when I say we're going to shut down the FBI, I actually mean it. 35,000 people work there. 20,000 of them are in back office positions, which is mostly where the politicization comes from. They're going to be gone and have to find work, and honest work, in the private sector. But 15,000 of them are actually talented special agents. They've lost some of their specialization, but many of them are talented special agents on the front lines that we need to reorganize into the U.S. Marshals, into the DEA, into the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, where they have greater specialization. And the U.S. Marshals, I think, will be well equipped to actually carry this function out without politicization and without taint. And I then come back to, are we going to solve the entire problem in the world with that fell swoop? We're not. I think we should be honest about that. But we set an example of what is possible to show the world this is how it's done. This is what it means to stand for freedom, including to protect our most valuable national asset, our kids. And for me, I speak on this not just as a presidential candidate, but as a father of 2 young sons, 3 years old and 1 year old myself. This is personal to me. And I think it's important that we actually stand up for our values with a spine rather than sweeping that underbelly under a rug as we have. Thank you for that question. And I'll take one last one before we wrap up.
Hi, Vivek. Thank you for being here. My name is Justin Sherman. I go to Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. My question's about abortion. One thing I disagree with President Trump heavily on is his pro-life stance. He does believe that there are exceptions to pro-life. I was curious to hear your opinion on that and what, as president, you would do to not only further the pro-life movement, but if you don't believe in exceptions, to get that 1% heard.
Yeah, so again, this is one of those things where I answer the Ukraine question honestly. I'm going to answer your question honestly and frankly here as well. I'm unapologetically pro-life. I always have been, and I stand for that position without any qualification. I believe that Roe versus Wade was wrongly decided. I believe that Dobbs was correct to overturn Roe versus Wade, creating a federal standard that did not exist. And that is why I am a staunch opponent of Biden's efforts to now codify Roe versus Wade in the law. The Constitution provides no space for that. This should be an issue where the states actually lead the way. I actually went to Iowa when they actually signed a historic piece of legislation. I don't know if many of you are aware of it, just a few weeks ago, codifying at least a 6-week standard. I think that this is progress that should come from the states. I also believe, as a constitutionalist, that we have to be consistent in constitutional principles. And so I remain open-minded to any constitutional scholar convincing me of the legal basis for the federal government, which I believe has no authority to codify Roe versus Wade into law, to codify a federal abortion ban into law either. I remain open-minded. But I think that we have to stay tethered to what the Constitution actually gives the federal government the actual power to do. This is an issue where the states need to lead the way first. And I am so grateful from states like Iowa to hopefully soon my home state in Ohio, we already are leading that way. That's federalism in action. That's the separation of powers in action. That's the Constitution in action. And I think that doing the right things lead to life in this country. And one thing I'll just leave you with is, if you get into debates with your friends or colleagues on this issue, I'll leave you with a thought. This doesn't have to be as divisive as we've made it out to be, actually. I think most people are actually more pro-life than they will admit. Clarence Thomas asked a great question from the bench in the Dobbs case. It's based on a real case. Pregnant woman walking down the street. She's assaulted. Unborn child dies as a result. None of us will meet someone who says that that criminal does not deserve liability for that death. That means most of us agree on the pro-life premise. So then the question is, how do we take this out of the realm of being about women's rights versus men's rights into human rights? I think we in our side of this can level up, stand for contraception, adoption, stand for childcare and at least reasonable paths to getting to yes, stand for greater sexual responsibility for men. We live in an era of genetic paternity tests that are accurate to a near 100% level. That's walking the walk when it comes to being pro-life. And what I believe is that actually takes the temperature down on this issue. It's not about men's rights versus women's rights. It's about human rights. And that allows us to actually stand on solid moral foundation rather than just playing tug of war on this issue. Thank you for that question. Here's what I'll say in closing before we wrap this up tonight. One is I'm impressed with the questions that we got, actually. This is good. We should want. I was going to give you guys an ask tonight, but I have a feeling I don't have to make the ask. You're already doing it. It's what I said to, I think it was John earlier, Jonathan. When you find yourself in any room, maybe it's a classroom, maybe in a few years it's a boardroom, maybe it's the dinner table. When you find yourself in a room and you find yourself to be the only person who believes what you do, you have a civic obligation, now more than ever, to stand up and say it without apology, respectfully. But part of respect means that you respect the person on the other side enough to tell them what you actually think. And we live in a moment now where if you're doing that, if you keep your end of the bargain, I'll keep mine. Here's what you will find. You were not the only person in that room who actually believed what you did. Fear has been infectious across our country. Courage can be contagious too. We just need more of us willing to step up and actually show it. What I want in this campaign, part of why I'm here tonight, I'm going to be very honest with you guys. We need young people in this movement. There are a lot of people who can win this election, I think, in a 50.1 tug-of-war margin. But we need a moral mandate in this country, a Reagan 1980-style revolution. And the difference between, I put this out on Twitter right before I came on stage, the difference between a 50.1 election and a Reagan-style revolution is actually young people in this country. It's all of you. And the people you know and the people you're going to bring along with you. It rests in your hands whether we have that moral mandate to deliver on this vision for our country. So I'm dependent on you for the help. We're trying to make it easy for you. We did our kitchen cabinet program. I don't like to pay political consultants 10% for raising me funds. If you all want to sign up and do it and help young people to do it, great. Make money too while you're at it. We want to make it easy for everybody to do it. If you have other ideas on how we can reach young people, that's one of the things I want to do in this campaign. Because other people in my shoes, they make a mistake. See, I'll take you behind the curtain a little bit. Actually, a lot of the older presidential candidates are in some ways scared of young people, actually. Don't show up on college campuses unless the questions are pre-vetted. But what I tell them is that they don't actually, many of them don't disagree with you. They just don't yet know what they actually believe. And what we really need to do is offer a vision that they can select. So if you guys do your part, I'm going to promise you I'll do mine. We are not some nation in decline, actually. We're taught to believe that. That we're at the end of the Roman Empire. That we're more like Carthage than Rome. Rome lasted 2,000 years. I don't think we have to be Rome. I don't think we have to be Carthage. I don't think we have to be a nation in decline. I think the truth is, as a nation, we are really just a little young, actually. Going through our own version of adolescence. Figuring out who we're really going to be when we grow up. And when you view it that way, it makes sense. Right? You go through adolescence, you go through that identity crisis. You lose your self-confidence. You lose your way a little bit. We're lost. That's where we are now. But I don't think we have to be in decline. I think we are still a nation in our ascent. In the early stages of our ascent. I don't even think we're at base camp yet. Rome lasted 2,000 years, including the second half. We're 250 years into this ball game. I think we're still on our way up. We've been taught to celebrate our diversity and our differences so much that we forgot all of the ways we are really just the same as Americans, bound by that common set of ideals that birthed this nation 250 years ago. I believe it deep in my bones that those ideals still exist. I need your help so that we together can actually revive them. E pluribus unum. From many, one. That's what won us the American Revolution. That is what reunited us after the Civil War. That is what won us 2 world wars and the Cold War. That is what still gives hope to the free world. And if we can revive that dream over group identity and victimhood and grievance, then nobody in the world, not a nation, not a corporation, not a virus is going to defeat us. That is what American exceptionalism is all about, and that is what we together will revive to save this great nation. Thank you all. God bless your families. God bless you. And God bless our United States of America. Thank you.